Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z Flashback, a series of short playthroughs of the 150 games that make up Atari Flashback Classics for Nintendo Switch. Today's game is Red Baron, a 1980 release that was developed alongside its much more well-known cousin, Battlezone, and you'll see there's a fair amount in common between the two of them when we start playing. So this game actually uses pretty similar hardware to Battlezone. It makes use of a 6502 processor, so the same one found in the Atari 8-bit computers, and makes use of the same pokey sound chip as the Atari 8-bit computers as well. Red Baron did also have an auxiliary board to handle the mathematical calculations that were required for its vector-based 3D graphics though. Battlezone also had one of these, but they were two slightly different auxiliary boards, so they weren't interchangeable unfortunately. So while the sort of core hardware of the machine was the same, if you wanted to actually convert a Battlezone machine into Red Baron or vice versa, you had to replace this auxiliary board as well. So, probably the most interesting thing about this game is that it features a very early example of adaptive difficulty, and it bases this on two things: the top 3 scores that are recorded in the arcade machine. It's a very small high score table on this one, and the average amount of time played over the course of the last 32 play sessions. So yeah, based on those things, it will adapt the difficulty. So if people have been consistently scoring high scores and having long play sessions, then it will make the game harder. If people have only been able to play for, I don't know, less than a minute or so, or get very low scores, then it will make the game a bit easier for the following people. So kind of a similar way to how slot machines work, with how likely they are to pay out on the jackpot based on how many people have played since then, supposedly anyway. Unfortunately, this wasn't a big success in the arcades. Despite having a very positive reception at the time, it didn't do very well, which is a real shame because it's quite fun. So, enough talk, let's go play Red Baron. Okay, here we are with Red Baron, a sort of companion piece to Battlezone, if you like, replacing the tanks of Battlezone with World War I biplanes. So it's kind of timely to be looking at this in context of the rest of the stuff on the Atari A to Z series, because over on Atari ST A to Z this week, we looked at Microprose's game Knights of the Sky, which came out much later. And it was actually quite an interesting one because it was considered quite difficult to model a lot of the stuff in World War I up until then, because they were quite complex shapes. So early flight sims tended to focus on jet fighters because jet fighters were much more straightforward to model in 3D. Because biplanes are quite complex shapes. But as you can see, Red Baron did pretty well with it. But then this was dedicated arcade hardware rather than a home computer, so... But yeah, this is a pretty straightforward game, mechanically. You proceed through various different phases, beginning with fighting against biplanes. Then you fight against some blimps, and then after that you have some ground targets to deal with. And the further you progress in the game, the more these things start shooting at you. And then we start combining things. So now we've got biplanes and blimps at the same time. And you'll see the way the scoring system works in this is that when you're dealing with the planes, it counts down their value. So the quicker you defeat them, the more points you'll get. That doesn't apply for the blimps and the ground targets, because you simply got to destroy those before you get to them. Oh, the first hit. Now, like I said in the intro, the original arcade version of this, which is basically what we're playing here, the original arcade version had an adaptive difficulty level based on the top 3 scores and the average length of play session over the course of the last 32 games. I don't know if they've implemented this in the Atari Flashback Classics version here. Oops, crashed into a mountain. Yeah, because I believe each version in here saves its state when you exit, because it will do things like save your high scores and so on. So I guess in theory it would be able to do that. I don't really have a a particular way to prove that one way or the other, though, unfortunately. Short of playing 32 times and seeing if it gets any more difficult or easier. We'll see. We'll have a couple of goes anyway. This is probably the best run I've had for a long time, so if it is adaptive difficulty, it's gone to the very easy level. Oh no, we've got a bit of a hail of bullets to deal with right now. Get out of here. Oh, gun's overheated. I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently it is, though. Oh no, that's it. Well, there we go. Right. Enter our name. Very slowly. Okay, not a bad score. That is the top score that I've had on this. So, let's have another go. See if we can beat that. And also see if it's any more difficult. I like the way the score counts up in this. It's one thing I've always liked in games is where you don't just get points added to your score. They sort of tick on like that. A bit like a sort of mechanical counter almost. It sort of gives you a satisfying feeling and an idea of how many points are being added to your score at once. Because you know if you hear beep, 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 lots of times, then there's lots of points being added at once. And that's exciting and satisfying. These early arcade games are really good at satisfying sound effects. Even as simple as they are. And like I mentioned in the intro, this machine made use of the same pokey sound chip that you'd find in the Atari 8-bit computer and the Atari 5200 console. So the sound effects you're hearing here would be perfectly reproducible on that hardware. So the graphics maybe not. And the Atari 8-bit was capable of vector graphics. Or polygonal graphics, I should say, rather than vector graphics. So there's examples of games like that. I think there was a port of Battlezone. I don't think there was a port of Red Baron, to my knowledge. But then there was later stuff like Paul Wokes' Mercenary. And what else was there? Whoops. Yeah, Flight Simulator 2, F-15 Strike Eagle. Oh no! Well, that wasn't beating my previous score, was it? Never mind. Let's have one more try, because this is quite fun. This is a really simple game, but it's one that I've always quite enjoyed. It's also one that I didn't really become aware of until quite recently, so it's still got a certain amount of novelty value to me. And it brings back some fond memories of some slightly later Atari games as well. It's, growing up I had an Atari Lynx, which, for those unfamiliar, was Atari's ill-fated, but rather cool 16-bit colour handheld. It was a contemporary of the first Game Boy and the Game Gear. And it was the most powerful handheld console at the time. But that also meant that it ate batteries like nobody's business. So it took 6 AA batteries, and they would last a couple of hours at most. I remember a particularly heartbreaking incident where I was playing Gauntlet 3 on the way home from my nan's in my parents' car. And I was getting to the end of the game, and the batteries ran out. And this was sort of the era before people really figured out how to save games onto cartridges and so on. I mean, we'd got the NES and Super NES around the time, and those had battery backup systems, but the Lynx cartridges were designed in such a way that it seemingly wasn't practical or possible to incorporate a battery backup system into them, because they were very thin sort of card-style cartridges, rather than the sort of more substantial units you had for stuff like the Game Gear and the Game Boy. But yeah, the reason I bring up the Lynx is that there was a game on the Lynx, one of the best games on the Lynx, in fact, commonly regarded as one of the best games on the Lynx anyway. It was a game called Warbirds, which very much feels like a spiritual successor to this. In that you're flying a World War I biplane, shooting down enemies. Don't remember Warbirds having any ground combat in it, but it was also more of a conventional flight sim than the sort of arcadey style stuff we've got going here. So rather than flying in a straight line and just sort of going left and right as we do here, Warbirds actually unfolded in true 3D. So it's a proper true 3D polygonal environment. Didn't use polygons for the planes, interestingly. It made use of the Lynx's hardware sprite scaling capability to provide a convincing but slightly juddery 3D effect. So like they could scale smoothly, but the Lynx didn't have hardware rotation like the Super NES did. And so any sort of rotation had to be handled just by different frames of animation on the sprites, which could look a little bit juddery at times. Oh dear. Oh no. That was disastrous. One more try, because I'm enjoying myself. And why not? There we are. I have the 3 high scores. Looking at it, maybe it doesn't save your high scores, because it didn't look like there were any saved in here. Or maybe I just haven't played the version in this compilation before. I know I've definitely played the copy of Red Baron that was on the PS4 version of Atari Flashback Classics, but maybe I haven't played the Switch version yet. I don't know. We'll see. I'm pretty sure the other arcade games in this compilation save your high scores, because they also have leaderboards and stuff as well, so you can see how well you stack up against other players around the world. All 200 of them playing the Switch version or whatever it is. I was really pleased to see at E3 recently, because E3's sort of just been unfolding at the time of recording. A little while back, you may recall that the PlayStation Vita got a release of this compilation. And unlike the PS4 and Xbox One versions, it's a complete collection like the Switch version that we're playing here. And at E3, Limited Run Games announced that they're going to do a physical release of that, which is great. So those who enjoy collecting this sort of thing, you can have a physical version on PlayStation Vita as well. So you can combine your love of collecting rare games with collecting games for a vastly underappreciated console. And with the physical production of Vita games coming to an end, I sense that in the next couple of years Vita games are going to be getting both harder to find and more expensive, so... Uh-oh. Whoops. So if you want to get on that collecting train, it's probably a good idea to do it right now. I really like the death effect in this, the way you just sort of see the tail of your aircraft ending up in front of you. It's just like a proper indication that, yep, you fucked up. Oh, this is getting tough now. So many bullets. Seems a little unfair that I have these tiny dot bullets while everyone else gets to fire gigantic diamonds at me. Oh, extra life. There we go. Yeah, 10,000 points. That used to be the sort of the default value at which you'd earn an extra life back in this era. None of your first extended 3 million points like you get in modern shoot-em-ups. Oh no. Oh, come on, I can beat my score. I can beat it. I can win. I have beaten it. Brilliant. I can relax now. Let's just enjoy the rest of this game. Well, there wasn't much of the rest of that game, was there, anyway? So, oh well, never mind. So, that is Red Baron. Like I say, a contemporary of Battlezone, but much less appreciated. It was very well received by people who reviewed it. It just didn't do all that well in the arcades, which is a bit of a shame. Oh, you can have more than 3 high scores. So it just uses the top 3 high scores to calculate the difficulty level then. Alright, well, I enjoyed that. Hope you did too. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.